to me, Katie?
320.
320. This is House Bill 320. House Bill 320 is a bill that asks the longitudinal data system. Sorry, let's start officially. This is a meeting of the Education Subcommittee of Ways and Means. We're going to consider 3 bills today. We may vote on them. We may just discuss them. First bill is House Bill 320. This is a bill that would ask the longitudinal data system to add to the data it collects data on special needs students and what their special needs were to help them track that. There was, I don't believe, Alistair, you can check me on this, I don't think there was any testimony against. And I also asked the director of the longitudinal data system if he thought this would impose any hardship or costs, and he said, no, it's easy to do for us. And so I would welcome discussion or a motion on this one.
I move.
Yeah, go ahead, do it, man. You have to say favorable.
Okay, I move favorable.
There you go. I have a favorable motion. Do I have a second? I have a second from Delegate Patterson. It's properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, I think we're going to do this one by a hand vote. If Vogel, if you can have your camera on, that'd be great. Raise your hand, please. And Hornberger's here. Good. And okay, so we have a unanimous vote with 1 absence right now. So that one we will take through to committee. Whoops. Sorry about that. The second bill we're going to take up, we may not vote on. I had some questions about it to begin with. Is Michael Sy still here? I don't see him on.
Yeah, he's here.
Okay.
I'm on.
Well, there you are. Sorry, man. Great. This is Bill 343. It's a bill that was designed to expand the number of basketball games that public schools can play during the regular season and also add in some possibility of games in what are called summer showcase games. We had some questions about it to start with, but between the time I woke up this morning and now, I've been notified that there are some that have concerns about the logistics of adding the games to the regular season. I will say that in the testimony, it was that they were trying to establish some equity between public schools and the number of games and the amount of attention that players got, from possibilities of going to college and other recognition, and private schools which play significantly more games, as many as 29 games in a regular season. This is 24. However, I have Michael Sy here. And I am going to personally recognize him. He is the director of athletics for Baltimore County. He's also the current president of the Maryland Public MPSSAA, Maryland Public School Scholastic Athletic Association, something like that, maybe Scholastic in Schools. And I've asked him, since I haven't heard it yet either, to go ahead and turn your camera on, Michael, and just try to get the committee an understanding of what your concerns are.
Well, good morning. First of all, I apologize for talking in my car. I'm just coming from another meeting, so this is the quietest place I could find. So with that being said, just wanted to take an opportunity in speaking with Baltimore County and our superintendent and with the other districts across the state of Maryland. We had some concerns, and I think all 24 LEAs share these concerns. So I'd like to start by saying that we recognize the differences, and recently, as in terms of this school year, there was changes in the COMAR language to allow coaches to work with their student athletes and to attend these scholastic events by the NCAA this year. So we were perplexed that this was coming back up again, because the language that is currently in COMAR has been changed to allow our schools to do this, but it's just a process in terms of how it's done. But our biggest concern is the impact that this is going to have, because this is specifically towards basketball. And again, I watched the last committee meeting when it was being discussed, and the word equity came up. And when we start talking about equity, this opens the door for every single sport in the state of Maryland now to request additional games to their season, because we're doing it for one particular sport. Currently, basketball plays more games than any other sport in the state of Maryland. So to be adding on these extra games, it would be inequitable for every single sport to then be to allow this to occur. With that being said, we believe that the current COMAR regulations that have been changed to allow will provide an equitable stance to allow all schools, based on their desire to participate in these NCAA events, to participate, not just basketball, but your softballs, your footballs, and all the other sports that we currently have. Also, from a financial standpoint, we know that there's going to be significant increases within our budgets to start just tacking on multiple games, not just from a basketball standpoint, but again, every other sport that would then be wanting to add these extra sports to their season. So from an equity standpoint, we have concerns. From a financial standpoint, we have concerns. We do believe that the recent COMAR changes that have been implemented through the state, the MPSSAA, will allow and provide more opportunities for our student athletes and our coaches to work with our kids so that we can maintain them in our public school setting, and it will put us on a level playing field. I think some of the things in terms of, as we talk about schedules and number of games and stuff like that, boys basketball plays a pretty much an unlimited number of games, whereas girls basketball actually in private has a cap on it. So the reality of it, the differences are not much, and we do realize that these scholastic opportunities will be allowed under our new COMAR regulation changes. So we are, I think, unanimously, all 24 LEAs unanimously against this new House bill, just because we have some concerns of the impact it's going to have, not just financially, but then also in terms of scheduling these events in our time window that we have for our athletic season.
Thank you, and thank you for coming on board. I would like to see if anybody in the committee would like to ask Mr. Tsai any questions about what he's just said or get any clarifications. Okay, I don't see anything. Michael, thank you so much. You can stay online if you want to hear what else we say. I do see Alexa Thomas from PZAM, and the original connection about some of the concerns was made through PZAM. Alexa, I don't know if you want to weigh in or not. You don't have to. I'm going to give you a chance to say something if you want to.
Thank you, Delegate Ebersol. I believe that PZAM did not take a position on this bill, as far as I'm aware. I believe that the Association of Boards of Education did, but PZAM did not.
Okay.
If you have more questions about that, you can reach out to Mary Pat Fannin.
Okay. Thanks. Yes, that's how we made the connection with Michael this morning. That was very helpful. Okay, so you hear that you've heard these concerns. We had a couple of others when I talked with Alistair, and we talked to some folks that go beyond these concerns, and they were pretty much, we were not as concerned about the in-season games. If you haven't followed the bill or you don't remember the testimony, basically right now they're limited to 22 games in a season, certain number each week, some weeks more, some weeks less. If they decide to join a tournament during the season, it would expand the number of games to 24. And then there was another part of the bill that suggested that summer showcase tournaments and games would also be sort of there's no limitation placed on those. So if they get involved in games, and there's some regulations about who they can play in-state and out-of-state, that's mostly technical, but they would play many more. My concerns there stemmed from if you have summer games, some kids might not be able to attend. Summer's often a time when kids are not available. They're not in school. They might be on vacation. That we put amendment saying that you couldn't be disciplined as far as playing the sport by the coach or other people if you were unable to make it to one of those showcase games. And then the other consideration we had was that we might put a cap on the number of showcase games in the summer that they could play. We were kind of searching for if there was a number out there. And so I don't believe we're going to vote on this bill today. I don't think we're quite ready. I would encourage you all to reach out to your own athletic directors in your counties or to other athletic directors to ask them if they have a similar concern about the number of games. We could single out a sport here if we feel like it's appropriate to. The slippery slope is the argument, and that's something we need to consider as a subcommittee. I'm open, but I think it'd be good for us to have a little discussion here about this. And I see Delegate Patterson has her hand up. Thank you, Delegate.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Ebersol. My question is with Mr. Tsai. Did he indicate that he represented the entire school districts or LEAs? And if so, I think his testimony is very compelling. I can respect the fact that you suggest that we do likewise, but I think I've been around here long enough for you as well, Delegate Ebersol, to know that sometimes ideas are presented and they have to be worked over the summer or worked through the next session. And so this is one that, with all of these questions, I'm wondering the merit of holding on to this bill.
Thank you. I think, yes, we may hold it over till the next meeting, or I may take the temperature of this subcommittee and the committee at large and see if we feel like we're well enough informed at this point to go forward. You didn't have a specific question for Mr. Sy, I don't think, so I'm not going to recognize him unless he wants to just put an emphasis on what you said. Let's go to Delegate Wu next and see if we see what the question is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm very glad to hear from Mr. Sale about that his position on this. It helps us to enlighten what may be the unintended consequence of this bill, right? Thank you very much. I just want to appreciate that you come here to testify.
Thank you. Anybody else with commentary at this point, either on what Mr. Sy has said about sort of singling out basketball and possibly pushing into a slippery slope, also about the amendments that I have suggested that we limit discipline, somebody else make it to a summer showcase, or that we maybe limit the number of games in a summer showcase. We'd be pulling a number out of the air there right now. We don't really know how many typically some of the private schools play at summer showcase, but I'm willing to listen to anybody who wants to comment on it. I will also check in with all of you over the next couple of days to see, kind of what the temperature of the subcommittee is on that.
Can I just say, sorry.
Well, first, Alistair, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's not entirely unprecedented that the General Assembly singles out a single sport. In 2020, the House of Delegates passed both this bill and a bill limiting the football season. Right, so it does happen.
And Alistair, you could answer me. Did the limiting of the football season, did that go all the way through? Did the governor sign that or not?
No, the Senate did not pass it, but the House passed both this.
And that was going in the other direction. That was Delegate Walker brought a bill to actually limit, because football is a very taxing sport, more so than basketball, but I think that's something of consideration also here in this particular case. Mr. Sy, did you want to say something else?
Oh, yes. I was just wanted to just make sure I emphasize that the current COMAR regulation changes that were put in place at the beginning of the school year does allow for students to participate in these showcases. And honestly, at the way that it's currently written, as long as it's approved by the National Federation of High Schools and the MPSSAA, they can attend. So currently there are restrictions in terms of what was proposed in terms of the 4 or whatever that number was going to be. Is actually what they're proposing is more restrictive. So we are going to be allowing kids to participate in these events. It just has to be no different than a regular event during the school year. It has to be sanctioned through the National Federation of High Schools and through the MPSSAA. As long as it goes that route, the school system can sign off and allow those kids to participate. So I just wanted to emphasize we're not restricting them, but again, we just want to allow those COMAR regulations to have an opportunity to be seen through.
Thank you. Delegate Fair.
So that did bring up a question in my mind then. Mr. Sy, could you help me understand if are all kids eligible to play in these showcases, or is there any kind of determining factor that would stop them from being able to play?
So
if I was a student there and I decided I wanted to play in the showcase and I'm on the basketball team already, am I just automatically entered, or do I have to go through a process?
Well, again, each district will have their own process in terms of how they would regulate this. So again, I can speak for Baltimore County. We would, because we've already been having these discussions, so we would make sure that we have all the paperwork that was in place during the regular basketball season because of the liability aspect of it. So we want to make sure that they have their parent permit, they have a ballot physical and those things, because again, this is an extension of the actual season. So those things will be put in place. We will make sure that they are part of our roster and that kind of stuff. Because again, if we're traveling with these kids during these showcase events, we just want to make sure that, there's some coverage liability wise as it relates to it. Every school system is probably going to be a little bit different, but I think most of them are going to be doing the same thing that we are. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, is that Delegate Fair? Is that,
it does.
No follow up? Okay. Anybody else at this point want to ask a question for clarity? We have obviously Pazam was here briefly. We also have someone from MSEA, but I think they're just keeping an eye on us. So they don't have a position on the bill. I know that. So I think at this point, we'll put this one aside. And right now, Delegate Patterson, relevant to your comments, we'll say that we'll take it up at a future subcommittee meeting, but we may rethink that. We'll see how that goes. All right, next bill we're going to take up is House Bill 515. And this bill is a bill that has been introduced by Dr. Solomon that would place some requirements on school systems if they're doing active shooter drills in their schools. His initial bill really just laid out a number of things, but among them was that they would limit some of the activities that are done during active shooter drills. I don't have the exact list, but I bet Alistair could do it. I'm flipping through the bill I found it. They can't have loud sounds intended to imitate gunfire, live exercises with individuals role-playing as an active shooter or victim, and they couldn't have similar activities that cause a drill to be traumatic. That's pretty broad, but it would limit those right off the bat. The other part of the bill said that they would have to notify parents the times and dates of the activities, of the drill, excuse me. There is some reporting and some information gathering relevant to the impact on students and the impact on stopping shooters, both, that we get information on those. And then finally, there's a section at the end that asks for the school systems to send home information concerning safe storage of weapons. All right. I have a couple of amendments I'd like to discuss and see if people would like to adopt them. I do know them. One of them has to do with that last section. One of them has to do with the dates, and one of them has to do with the reporting. To make sure that I'm pretty accurate, I'm going to turn it over to Alistair to let him describe them in accurate detail here.
Thank you, sir. So as the bill came in, so I think the amendments are a mix of sponsor amendments and proposed amendments by the subcommittee. As the bill came in, it required that under the Maryland Safe to Learn Act, which passed in 2018, each school has to have a assessment team set up that does some assessments. As the bill came in, it modified that process and include in the assessment team's assessments that they look at mental health services for students and update the assessment model guidance annually. The sponsor asked that be struck. And instead of updating that annually, that instead the school active shooter drills be updated annually by MSDE, taking into account the data that the bill requires be collected. So that's an amendment there. There's also an amendment that the sponsor requested that rather than just have drills, have the opportunity for schools to have active shooter trainings as part of what MSDE requires as part of the incorporation into the annual drill schedule. So that's been placed in there. Additionally, the bill as it came in required that the Center for School Safety study the data that's collected through the bill of best practices in active shooter with a institution of higher education. There's an amendment that opens that up a little bit more broadly and allows it to be any federal or national research entity that I think it should say state or national research entity that the center finds credible. They can partner with them to study the data that is collected, and additionally to identify some best practices for these drills or training, and eventually have MSD promulgate them. And then finally,
are those the sponsors amendments in full, Alistair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's take those up and see if anybody has any commentary on any of those, first of all, or if we want to move those amendments. Somebody's gonna have to say something.
Any questions? Does that make sense? It's kind of a laundry list.
You can ask questions if you're unclear what he said.
Can we go amendment by amendment so that I can understand the first one better?
Do you want to move on each amendment, or can we take them? Can he go back? What we're going to have some other amendments that are coming from Alistair and I that we have talked about that we would like you to consider. They go a little further, so I thought we'd consider the sponsor amendments first. If we can consider them as a whole without separating them out, I'd like to.
Sure.
So try it one more time, Alistair, and
sure.
Questions.
I'll try to be a little clearer. Sorry. So the first thing,
Green, go ahead and just say, Alistair, can I ask you about that? I'm okay with that here.
So the first thing is altering. So the bill as it came in required that annually this assessment team model policy be updated, and that it include increased mental health services for students and school personnel. So that was in section 71507. That's been removed, and instead of that, there is an annual requirement that in MSDE under current law is authorized but not required to update the annual shooter regulation. Annual drill schedule to potentially include active shooter drills. They're not required to. The bill required that they would be, and required that that they were developmentally and age appropriate. In doing so, the sponsor amendment takes that out. Instead, it requires that MSDE look at best practices annually and update the regs if it chooses to update the active, to include in the annual schedule of drills, active shooter drills or training, that be done annually.
So this would update page 7, lines 15 through 19, give or take.
It's a little bit before that. It's at the start of 71509, subsection A. There's a discussion of MSDE's updating the annual drill schedule. The bill required that it include active shooter drills. The sponsor amendment would remove that requirement. It would also add a new subsection after that requires that the bill creates this process by which school systems are collecting data on active shooter drills. And so in its annual integration between all the drills that are done in the school and the active shooter drills, it takes that data into account, if that makes sense. The another thing that the sponsor amendments do is switch, instead of just drills, like under current law, if you're going to incorporate anything into the annual schedule of drills, it just has to be a drill about active shooting. The sponsor amendment allows that to be training rather than a drill. And finally, the last thing is it loosens who can, it loosens the Center for School Safety's obligation to study this with an institution of higher education, and instead allows it to study it with potentially an institution of higher education or potentially a research entity instead, and to in collecting this data that they're going to be collecting annually, to identify best practices for the active shooter drills or training. So sorry, quite a
the idea there was that there was some concern, and I asked the question during the hearing about how necessary are these, the allegory about building the entire plane out of the black box material, and so we want to gather data to decide at what level these trainings should occur, but we can't make that move yet until we get some information. So we, along with the sponsor, we beefed up the school safety commissions. They're going to be required to come up with better information so we can have a look at it. We're going to ask them to give us an initial report in December. It won't be complete yet, but it might spur us to action next legislative session. We'll see. I don't want to jump the gun, but I do want to know, at what cost, where's the balance here? And so I'm hoping to see the balance between the emotional distress it's caused and the actual safety that it creates in the school. And we're not experts on that. And so I want them to gather that data. Delegate Hornberger and then Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, but the language that dealt with the safe storage of firearms.
Yes.
Is that up for debate right now, or do you want to wait?
Well, let's wait, but we are going to discuss that. I will. I'll give you. I'll bury the lead a little here. We're also going to suggest an amendment that would say they can't be required to give the exact date and time of the drill, but we're going to go with a month. That parents know sometime during September this is going
right. Yeah.
For two reasons. One, schools would have really a lot of trouble adhering to an exact schedule, and then they would get in trouble. But it's also been suggested that if the community knows at large the exact date and time, if there is someone who has nefarious intent, this would be a great time for them to enact it because it might cause confusion about whether the event was real or not.
Yeah, it would also, have students potentially outside in a more vulnerable
Right.
posture.
And the police might not respond as they normally would because they might believe that it's part of the drill, for a while. There might be confusion. And so we feel like they
I would
should-
just say in keeping with that, and ultimately we want to just lower the temperature and lower any trauma. We don't want to preclude trauma happening for what's associated with this. And in terms of sending literature that talks about guns or makes references to firearms, I don't know if that is in that same posture.
Yeah, we're gonna have to take those apart one at a time, and that they're all good. But first, let's back up because those are things that sort of came from some of our, MSDE weighing in and some other MSCA, getting some information from them. These are ones that the sponsor got. And his basically are the things that Alistair has discussed. And Delegate Wu.
Yeah, sorry, we got a lot of guests coming, so sometimes I step out. So I think I'm a little concerned about active shooting. Really, if we can set a sunset clause and we get a lot of data, then we come back to look at how effective it can be. Because right now, in the school system, we have so many really situations we need to manage. It's not like a fire drill, right? Like fire alarm is easier to manage. Active shooter, then the teachers, every special education teachers, every classroom, they need to be prepared. That creates a very unnecessary, a huge burden for them, right? So, and the active shooter is something. It's not be easily managed. That's my concern.
And I think several of us share those concerns.
Yeah. So if we can set a sunset clause, right? So after like several years, we come back say, is that really effective or needed?
Yeah.
Because we can add the list to many, many more, right?
Right.
We can
And going
see that.
forward, I think that's why we want to gather some of this data. We shouldn't act without having something standing behind us. I will tell you that if we put in a bill limiting active shooter drills, there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction, I believe, in the community. They're going to, that, how dare you? Our kids need to be safe. We need to make an evaluation if this is really increasing safety versus the emotional distress that it causes. And I don't think we're well enough informed to do that at this point, but I share your concerns. Delegate Vogel.
Yes, Mr. Chair, 3 points. One on what you just said. This to clarify, this bill does not get rid of school shooting drills. It only gets rid of live simulation drills, correct?
Some of the live simulation, yes.
Right.
They can
And
do
then
live simulation. They can't have loud sounds, sounds like guns. They can't have role playing with active shooters or victims. And then the broader one, and I'm willing to leave it in, similar activities that may cause a drill to be traumatic. Okay. That's broadly, but it's nice for us to say it, I think.
Got it. And then all the amendments that we're considering right now are sponsor amendments.
That's correct, isn't it, Alistair?
Yes, so far I've only talked about things that Delegate Solomon requested.
And will we be able to see a reprint at some point before voting on the final bill?
Yes.
Okay, great. With that, I'd move favorable on the amendments.
A second.
Okay. And Delegate Fair, did you want to say something? I mean, we have a motion a second, but now there's discussion allowed too.
I was just going to make the motion. So
Excellent.
Delegate Vogel beat me.
Darn it. It's on the record. No, we don't. These are very ad hoc meetings, so there's not a great deal of that. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, motion on the sponsor amendments as described by Alistair. All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Delegate, I can't see you, and so I'm not sure how you're voting. Okay, we still have a quorum of votes without his to say that we move the amendments. Now, I would like to discuss the amendments that we have gone further in doing. As I said, I buried the lead on them a little bit, but Alistair, would you like to describe those?
Yes, so in part, these are just like integrating the sponsor amendments and making sure that they work a little bit. So the sponsor amendments did not have a date for setting this process of reviewing when things would happen and so forth. So the proposed committee amendments would say that the first iteration of when the Center for School Safety has to set a best practices thing would be this upcoming school year by October 1st. And then that would be a periodically reviewed process. So that is a new, the sponsor amendments required that they identify best practices, but left it open to when that identification would take place. And this would put a firm date behind it. Secondly, because that process of identifying best practices sets off MSDE's incorporation, if they choose to incorporate active shooter drills into the panoply of drills that are done each year, they would start doing that in the following school year, the 2024-2025 school year, and then annually update that with the best practices that the Center for School Safety identifies. A second amendment alters the original bill's requirement that the date and time of each drill be made available to the parent at the start of the school year. Rather than do that, it would just be the month that the drill or training would take place, so that to give schools a little bit of leeway and to ensure that no funny business could happen on the day of the drill if someone were to take advantage of knowing when exactly it was going to happen. Students and staff are still informed, however, prior to the drill. And then finally, addressing Delegate Hornberger's concern, and MSDE raised this in their testimony about this bill, there's a removal of requiring MSDE to collect information on the proper storage of firearms and distribute that information each year to students.
So there are three essential things there. One is making this Center for School Safety come up with some really good best practices. Two, loosening the requirement of indicating when they'll occur. And three, removing the language at the end of the bill relevant to sending home. We can take them separately. We can take them as a whole. I'm open to discussion. If somebody would like me to separate them out and vote on them, we can do that, or we can vote on them as a group.
What was the third option? I'm sorry.
The third thing is at the end of the bill, there's a requirement that school systems send home information concerning safe storage of guns. It's the very end of the bill, letter F. I was a little surprised to see it there. It seems like an unusual location for it. This concept that schools, need to do everything. I mean, it could be a separate bill for someone if they wanted to do that to make them do it. But I will tell you honestly, I'm concerned that this, you can sense it. We have a fine Republican on the committee here, but this is going to cause this could weigh this bill down, okay? Because it will suddenly become a bill about guns and not about keeping kids safe. So I'm concerned that while I don't think it's a bad idea for parents to have this information, I'm concerned that school systems may not need to be charged with disseminating that information, or that's up to you, but that it probably shouldn't be part of this bill. So we'd like to strike letter F on page 7, the entirety of letter F.
Yeah, I don't mind making a motion to move them on the bus, all three together.
Okay, we have a motion to do all three.
Second.
I have a second. Okay, is there any further discussion or any need for anybody to separate them out? I don't want to railroad this through. Okay, seeing none, if there's no further discussion, I'll take a vote on the amendments. All in favor, raise your hands, please.
Aye.
Okay, we're unanimous on that. And so we now have a fully amended bill. Alistair, there's nothing else that we need to amend. Am I correct? Okay, so Delegate Vogel, you suggested you'd like to see it. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes you guys have a sense of it. We could delay. You have to be careful. Okay, we're getting into session. So, I mean, I know sometimes you'll feel like things are rushing by you, and that's true sometimes. So I don't want to do this early on. Later on, there'll be less opportunity for this sort of thing. I'm willing to hold this. I probably would have another meeting maybe tomorrow where we would see if you were ready to vote on it. I would have just a quick one and see if you're not ready to vote, you're not, but try to get us together and see if we could vote on it. But if you feel you need 24 hours to look this over, you let me know. Delegate Vogel, you were the one who mentioned that concept.
If my colleagues are ready to move on it, I'm ready to move on it.
Is there
I feel like I have a pretty good sense.
We have to be a team here. Delegate Miller.
I agree. And because I'm like more of a visual person, so I'm like trying to search. So I would like to see it as much as I can, especially as we're learning this process. And some of us are very new to this process. So trying to go back and forth, I would like to see the whole thing, just so I can picture it all. But that's up to you guys. I can always,
let's entertain it as a vote to see if we want to hold voting on the bill for say 24 hours and maybe have a meeting tomorrow. Because if we're ready to go, I'd love to get this on the voting list for Ways and Means tomorrow if we're ready to go. So show of hands. Just, this is kind of a straw vote. Who are we missing? I feel like we're missing somebody. Oh, Dana's not here. Okay. Thank you. So show of hands, if you would like the bill to be held, and so you can see an interlineated version of it. Okay, I got 1, 2. Show of hand 3. Show of hands if you're willing to move the bill forward without that, and I am willing to. And we have 4 people who are willing to move forward on it. So sorry, guys. It's democratic. Sorry.
I move favorable.
Chair doesn't always vote. So do we have a motion on the bill as amended? And we will still send you a version so you can see what it is. And if you have an objection, you know, if there's something there that you don't understand, come to me and I'll either try to explain it or get Alistair to explain it to you, and we can reconsider. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, just for the new members,
Yeah, there you go.
you will have the ability to see the fully written bill prior to voting. And you also have the ability to offer amendments in full committee as well before the bill moves in full committee. So plenty more opportunities to get another bite at the apple. But on the sake of expediency, unless there's objections to the bill or to the substance of the bill, let's just keep it rolling.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the way thing in a 90-day session. Sometimes you will be able to see it. I would say that if you have an amendment that you want to do, you should come talk to me about it. We might reconvene here. Or if it's last minute, it sounds pretty good. We could offer it. I don't think you're going to find anything. The point at this point is not to be too nitpicky. We've got a pretty good bill here, I think, at this point.
I move favorable on the bill as
I have
amended.
a favorable motion on the bill as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor of the bill as amended, raise your hands, please. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have enough, Alistair, and so we will bring this bill to committee. Alistair, if you would endeavor to send people an interlineated version, since we're just getting
Yes.
process, I would appreciate it.
Does anyone have, if you want to just email me separately offline of a preferred email, otherwise I can just send it to your main delegate.
Here, I make a suggestion because Katie has everybody's email. If you send it to Katie, she will forward it on to the committee members. Okay, then you won't have to worry about that.
Okay, sounds good.
Outstanding. Hey, listen, good work, everybody, today. This is what we're supposed to do. Talk to you soon. We're adjourned.